Okay, so we're going to talk about the circular flow of economic activity, which can be a little bit tricky. And before we get into it, I want to remind you of the question I asked a couple of times when we were looking at what is a consumer and what is a producer. So remember when I asked if a producer could also be a consumer, and could a consumer also be a producer? Hopefully that rings a bell. Well, now we're going to look at exactly how that happens. So, hopefully by the end of this part of the lesson, you will be able to answer the guiding question here. Okay, which is, how do businesses and individuals participate in both the product market and the factor market in an economy? So, you're going to have to know what the product market and the factor market are before we get into the formal definitions of both, because they're both vocabulary terms. We've already been talking about the product market. Simply put, that is where goods and services are bought and sold. So anytime that you go out to buy something or go on to Amazon to buy something, you are participating in the product market. Anytime you go to have your hair cut or you go to hire a lawyer or an accountant, you're participating in the product market, only you're buying services instead of actual goods. Now, remember when we talked about the factors of production? Well, the reason why we talked about those is because those factors are bought and sold. And that's what creates the factor market. That's why we call it the factor market, because what's being bought and sold in that market are the factors of production. And just as a quick refresher, the factors of production would be land, capital, labor, and entrepreneurs. Okay, so this is the circular flow of economic activity diagram. It's referred to in your reading, but they don't include it in your reading. Don't ask me why. I don't know. It's not there. However, you're going to have to know how to read this diagram because it will show up on the Chapter 1 test. So let's figure out how to read this, okay? And, yeah, we'll keep red for now. So, up here, we have the product market. That's where goods and services are bought and sold. And we've been talking about that for quite a while. Down here, we have the factor market. And that is where the raw materials for the production of goods and services are bought and sold. So this chart can be a little bit confusing because it is in a circle. Actually, you have a circle within a circle. And it can be a little bit confusing in terms of, well, where do we begin? So I'm going to solve that problem right now. And we'll start with businesses opening up and starting a business, right? That'll be right here. And what they have to do, we've talked about this in class, is buy productive resources. What are productive resources? Well, another way of saying that are the factors of production, and there are 4 of them. Land, capital, labor, and entrepreneurs are listed in the 4 factors, but I mean, entrepreneurs don't go out and they buy themselves, but they do come up with the ideas, okay? So, in order for that to happen, and we've talked about this in class, businesses are going to have some startup capital. Oops, that's supposed to be a dollar sign. Let me try that again. They're going to have some startup money. Okay? Now, what do they do when they get that money? They do the following. They go to the factor market and they purchase a certain amount of the factors of production. They either buy land or they buy capital goods. Remember what capital goods were? Okay, large heavy machinery, tools that make other products, okay, or they hire people. Okay, so we'll draw a blue line through here as they're hiring people. Now, when those people get hired, they have jobs, and because they have jobs, they earn money themselves. Now, what do they do when they earn that money? Well, we need to pick a color here, so let's do pink. Okay, they get paid and they spend their money. It's called consumer spending. And where do they spend it? They spend it in the product market. Now, once that money changes hands, once they buy the product, it becomes income for the producer, okay, revenue for the business, which the business then uses when it goes back down to the factor market. Now, once that money makes it back to the businesses as revenue or income, they go back to the product market, or I'm sorry, the factor market, and the process starts all over again. Okay, now you can read this going the other way as well. So if we're going to read this going in the opposite direction, we would be starting with individuals. Okay, so if we begin with individuals, they are going to take themselves and insert themselves into the factor market because people make up labor, and labor is one of the 4 factors of production, which are listed right over here. And basically what they're doing is they're offering themselves in that market for sale in terms of their labor, their expertise, their skills, their knowledge, their know-how. And people with more of those things tend to command higher salaries. The money that is paid to employees as their salaries becomes their income. Okay, that goes back to them, which they then use to buy consumer goods in the product market. Now, you have an exchange of money again, because once those goods are purchased, it creates revenue for the business or business income for the producers, okay, which they then take back down here to the factor market and buy more factors of production so that they can create more goods and services. And we can see that process here, because once they go to the factor market, they take what they purchased in terms of land or employees or capital. All right, they had just purchased productive resources, okay, and they create more goods and services, which they then sell in the product market. And those goods and services are purchased and sold to individuals. And once that happens, that consumer spending becomes business income over here. And then the process begins again.